On my way to Israel's south, I was suddenly stopped by a barrage of rockets. Then I saw it. The Iron Dome intercepted them all. In that moment, you might think it is safe again. But no. Even though the rockets were intercepted, razor-sharp shrapnel was still falling from the sky. And after that, it all starts over again. 1, 2, 3, 4. More rockets racing directly towards me. There's actually no protection from rockets unless you are inside a bomb shelter. And that is something you have to realize. And it's also why so many people suffer from panic attacks. I don't know if you can see them. I'm filming completely blind. I cannot see the screen. But even inside a bunker, the stress level is so high that it can still cost you your life. And that is what happened a few days ago. A young girl, only 9 years old, died because her heart couldn't handle the stress. She died from shock, out of fear of the rockets from Gaza. The Israeli city of Sderot is a small town very close to the Gaza Strip. When I last visited the city in December of 2022, the people told me, well, we don't want to be intimidated and driven out by the Hamas terrorist organization. But this year, not even 12 months later, the scene was completely different.
Man kann schon hören, dass wir nah an Gaza dran sind im Moment in Sderot.
You can hear that we're close to Gaza now. Sderot has been evacuated. It's a ghost town. You can smell the gunpowder in the air. In the background, you can hear the sound of the war. It's probably not rockets, but rather the Israeli military retaliating, though that's just a guess.
Aber das ist auch erstmal eine Vermutung. So geht das hier die ganze Zeit.
The citizens of Sderot are used to being targets of Hamas rockets. Nevertheless, this time the residents were evacuated because there were simply too many rockets. And only a very few people remain in the city, mostly the elderly or sick, who say they don't have the strength to flee or the will. You notice the emptiness even when entering a supermarket. On one hand, music blares pleasantly, making you think like, well, everything's quite normal. But then you find all of these empty shelves that are completely and frighteningly empty. And above all, you notice that the customers are missing. There were only like 4 people inside the store, 2 of whom were young soldiers.
Wenn man auf der Straße die Menschen mal fragt, du könntest du mir mal sagen,
if you ask people on the streets if they can tell you what the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict is about, the answer is usually vague.
Wenn man dann aber mal fragt, worum geht's denn?
But if you ask them about the conflict between Israel and the Palestinians, almost everyone will give you a detailed answer, regardless of whether they have ever opened a history book.
In der Hand gehalten hat oder nicht, völlig egal.
And this is reflected in the media coverage as well. On a single hill in Sderot, there were huge numbers of camera crews from all over the world. I'd estimate there were no fewer than 60 production teams with their telephoto lenses zooming in as close as possible to the Gaza Strip, always waiting to capture any action by the Israeli military, preferably a mistake that could make the headlines. No military or conflict in the world is scrutinized as closely as the one between Israel and the Palestinians. And right after I arrived on the press hill, something happened. A kind of light ball seemed to slowly descend over Gaza, and in the end it was followed by a large explosion. Unfortunately, I had a wide-angle lens on my camera at that time. Experts told me the Israeli military seemed to have targeted an underground terror tunnel.
Außerdem stieg dann eine schwarze Rauchsäule auf.
Next, I saw dark smoke rising, indicating an ammunition depot had been hit.
Und man hat immer wieder
Repeatedly, you could see dust and sand being stirred up, indicating moving convoys of tanks or other heavy armored vehicles.
die Gefahr von Raketen.
The danger of rocket fire remained high while I was in Sderot. Once a rocket is fired from Gaza, targeting the small southern city, people have a mere 15 seconds to get to safety. This tiny amount of time is why the entire town seems littered with rocket shelters.
Eine Stadt Sderot auch mit Bunkern übersät ist.
You can find the bunkers all over the city. Many of them are decorated with artistic paintings. But let's get inside one. It smells like a dirty train station, but never mind. The yellow line on the floor marks the point you should cross in an emergency. Only then are you well protected from the blast wave and shrapnel. Speaking of blast waves, a colleague taught me another rule to keep in mind under attack. Not only should you lie down or protect your body from shrapnel injuries, but you should also open your mouth slightly. Why? So that the blast wave does not tear your insides apart. In other words, the security situation in this city is anything but normal. Not only does this small town in southern Israel, but it has also been under regular and deadly rocket fire from Gaza for almost 20 years.
Auffällig ist aber auch, wie gering das Interesse vieler Medienhäuser.
It is striking how little interest many media outlets seem to have in the stories unfolding behind the front line. When you leave the press hill and head to the city center of Sderot, you suddenly find very few camera crews in this ghost town, even though there are many stories to be told. For example, there was a truck on the side of the road that had been hit by a rocket. It was a direct hit, severely damaging the truck. The owner, an Israeli of Russian descent, showed me the shrapnel that went through the truck, drilled through the thick walls, and even pierced the driver's seat. Right through the part where you would normally lean your head. In the end, the shrapnel smashed into the windshield. If there had been someone in the truck at the time of the attack, they would probably have been killed. When you see scenes like this, you understand why Sderot was evacuated. It also becomes clear why people are saying that things cannot go on like this. According to them, Hamas, which has been causing conflict for years, must be defeated at all cost. And while I was looking at the sad situation, suddenly a car drove past us. Loudspeakers mounted on the roof were blaring cheerful Hebrew music.
Menschen aufheitern zu wollen.
Many Israelis, especially the religious, see it as their duty to try and cheer people up, especially in difficult times. It seems an integral part of the Israeli character.
Ashkelon liegt nördlich des Gazastreifens.
Ashkelon, located north of the Gaza Strip, is a medium-sized city with high-rise buildings and extensive infrastructure. A conventional city in southern Israel, not a small town. Even though it was fall, the temperature reached 38 degrees in the sun. Perfect weather for the beach. But the vast beach of Ashkelon was deserted. People didn't dare leave their homes. It seemed clear that, in the event of shelling, they would have no more than 20 seconds to reach a rocket shelter. And that, with all due respect, seems impossible if you're swimming or lying on the beach. Even if you run towards the road, once the alarm sounds, the hot sandy ground would swallow your feet and slow you down. This is the things you gotta bear in mind in times of war. One elderly man, however, defied the danger. Before going into the water, he told me in broken English, "Fuck Hamas." In high spirits, he then walked towards the sea. It was a small glimmer of hope to see the senior citizen refusing to let the rhythm of his life be destroyed by an Islamic terrorist organization, even though it was somewhat careless or perhaps even naive to some extent.
Ich habe auch probiert, dann mit dem Auto.
Next, I tried to get to the kibbutzim in the Gaza region that had been so badly destroyed. Nahal Oz, Be'eri, and Hashlosha. I was amazed at how many cars were on the roads, and I noticed that most of the vehicles were filled with young soldiers, not civilians. They were all driving towards the border, which will likely soon see a war break out.
Ich habe dann mal an einer Tankstelle gehalten.
I then stopped at a petrol station where I witnessed scenes you wouldn't normally see. Ultra-Orthodox Jews, who usually have a negative attitude towards the military, were trying to pass on prayer materials to young soldiers, explaining how to use prayer straps and so on. But the scene inside the gas station was also unexpected. The mostly young soldiers, who are nurses, bakers, lawyers, or artists in their civilian lives and now have to protect their country, were buying everything that wasn't nailed down. I also saw groups standing on the side of the road, singing. And I saw young people who didn't seem religious at all, but were still reading the Torah. It was as if they were looking for some kind of encouragement that, if they couldn't get it from the government, they sought from the highest authority of all. Ultimately, and you only realize this when you're in a war zone, you really feel like your life is in God's hands. That might sound a bit old-fashioned to someone who hasn't experienced it, but that is exactly how it feels when you fear for your sheer existence. Will a sniper's bullet penetrate your throat? You don't know. The possibility certainly exists.
Aber genauso fühlt es sich an. Man weiß die ganze Zeit nicht, erreicht einen gleich irgendwie ein Sniper mit einem Halsdurchschuss. Das weiß man nicht. Die Möglichkeit besteht nämlich da unten.
As I continued driving, I reached a military roadblock. Further travel was impossible.
Da hat das Militär dann die Straße zugesperrt gehabt.
The risk of being hit by an anti-tank missile or a bullet was too high.
Paar ungesunde Snacks essen.
I'll eat a few unhealthy snacks. Earlier on the beach in Ashkelon, the few people I met advised me to simply eat whatever I fancy. Well, I decided to give it a try, because the mood here in the south of Israel is certainly not great. In fact, it's very, very depressing.
Natürlich werde ich im Laufe der nächsten Tage.
Despite the roadblock, I'll try to get into the destroyed kibbutzim again over the next few days. I want to see the places of horror for myself, even though it will probably be unbearable. But I think it's part of understanding this conflict. The problem is that I'm not allowed to drive closer to the border in an unarmored vehicle at the moment. I'll work on that issue and get back to you soon. Thank you very much for watching.
Ich arbeite dran und ich melde mich wieder. Vielen Dank fürs Zuschauen.